Views on industrial activity, role of the public sector. Before getting deeper, let me ask you some very basic questions. So, you have finalized the thoughts of producing and distributing goods and services, primarily via socialism. What next?
Simple. If it is in my hand, I would have created rules and regulations to define very clear role of public and private sector, and as mentioned earlier, I would have ensured that there is huge role of public sector in production and distribution of goods and services. That is, right from planning to execution, and limited role of private sector in helping the government where it could.
Pretty insightful, must say. Let us see what was done by Indian government. Indian government passed the Industry Policy Resolution 1948 that envisaged a mixed economy in which the public sector and private sector would function side by side. It divided the industries into 4 categories. Industries that were to be state monopolies. These were limited to atomic energy, arms and ammunition, and railways. Basic industries in which the state would have the exclusive right to new investments, though it could take private sector cooperation if it was the national interest. 6 industries were included in this category: iron and steel, shipbuilding, mineral oils, coal, aircraft production, telecommunications equipment. Industries of national importance that the state might regulate and license in consultation with the state governments. 18 industries were in this category. All other industries that would be open to private sector without constraints. The resolution envisaged, however, that the state would increasingly participate in the last 2 categories of industries as well.
Great! That's like socialism. With this resolution, almost all the responsibility of producing and distributing goods and services would have gone in the hand of government officials, right?
Not every responsibility, at least not in the short term, because it takes time for the policy to get implemented. But in the long term, yes, state has sown seeds for the eventual outcome of full control of production and distribution of goods and services by them.
Okay, but what about the existing private companies at that point of time? We keep hearing about these Tatas and Birla story. Were their companies also got converted into state property?
No, that would have been great dampener to the self-interest fulfillment dimension of entrepreneurial abilities of our country. State reassured foreign investors and domestic business community that their holdings would not be nationalized for the next 10 years. This meant that any existing private company, even those in Category 2, would continue to operate without the fear of being nationalized for the following 10 years. Then came the IPR 1956, replaced IPR 1948. IPR 1956 redivided the industries into 3 categories, emphasized the mutual coexistence of both private and public sector, emphasized the role of state in the development of the private sector through financial support and technical guidance, focused on reducing regional disparities and balanced development of different sectors, aimed at establishing training infrastructure in universities and industry houses for skilled manpower, and also emphasized to some extent on the role of foreign capital in the economic development. The Mahalanobis model on which the second 5-year plan and IPR 1956 formally rested is often credited with providing the intellectual basis for the development strategy based on promotion of heavy industry. But in reality, the decision followed directly from the self-sufficiency objective that guided much of Nehru's thinking on economic policy. Nehru wanted India to be independent of foreign markets in a relatively shorter period of time. This meant the self-development of the machinery sector so that future investments would not have to depend on external sources of supply. The next question was who should build the heavy industry sector. The national independence objective meant that the country could not rely on foreign firms even if they were willing to invest in this sector, which they were not wanting to do so far in any case. It was also recognized that the resources of Indian private firms were too meager to allow them to fulfill the task. This left the public sector as the only option. As discussed earlier also, Nehru's vision was more consistent with interventions in production via direct public sector participation and licensing of private sector investment to progressively realign the domestic production basket with the consumption basket. So, the main changes in the 1956 IPR were on the side of strengthening the role of public sector in production and distribution of goods and services by following the principles of socialistic pattern of society as the guiding pattern for economic policy.